on LBC.
Well, as I said before, we're going to stick with the theme of conspiracy theories, the internet and algorithms and politics in cyberspace. Now, I've covered literally dozens of American elections, both presidential and midterm, and the amount of money that you have to spend as a candidate, either presidential candidate or congressional, senatorial, goes up every year. And that inflation is largely down to the amount of money that candidates have to spend on television advertising. And if you happen to be in a swing state in America in election season and you have the misfortune of switching on your television, all you will see are endless political ads slagging off, the partner, the opponent on the other side, and obviously extolling the virtues of, the candidates themselves. It's unbelievably tedious, and you kind of wonder why people bother to spend this much money on this, what seems to be ineffective campaigning. And then you get these extraordinary new examples of campaigning, mainly on things like TikTok, where, for instance, the guy who's going to be the next mayor of New York, bar some miracle, Zoran Mamdani, came out of nowhere with a campaign on TikTok, very much involving him, talking to people on the ground in New York, Trump supporters and not Trump supporters. And he's a very left-wing Democrat. He describes himself as a democratic socialist. And he literally came out of nowhere to win the primaries in the Democratic Party in New York with a sizable margin, which means that he beat the kind of scion of the Democratic dynasty, the Cuomo dynasty in New York, by, I think it was 25% or something, correct me if I'm wrong, which means he'll be the next mayor of New York City, something that has deeply upset Donald Trump. But Trump himself has used social media and cyberspace to great effect to campaign, to get into the White House over and over again. So how does this work? What are the dangers of politics moving into the cybersphere? Does it mean you only ever listen to your own arguments? Does it mean that there's no level playing field? And remember, in 2020, Trump still contests that election, says he was robbed and Biden shouldn't have been president. And there's a surprising amount of Republicans who still believe that stuff. So how much of a danger is this new kind of political campaigning to the nature of democracy? Let's speak to Dr. Michael Cohen. He's the author of Modern Political Campaigns, the CEO of the Cohen Research Group, and he's got a smile on his face, even though he's probably woken up incredibly early in the United States. Welcome to the program, Michael.
Thank you very much, Matt. I do appreciate the opportunity, and it is early here, but as you can see, it's bright out because it's summer. So,
well, there we go. So no excuses for lying in beyond 7 o'clock, whatever. Anyway, thank you so much for coming on the program. So give us the gist of it then, the double espresso version of your argument, about politics moving into cyberspace.
Yeah, the espresso version of this is that politics has basically moved into 3 phases of development, and right now it is professionalism, technology, and speed. And the idea here is that if you are broadcasting, and you're a broadcaster and you've been doing this for decades, the thing is with candidates right now, they are becoming their own broadcasters. They're speaking with their audiences directly. They're speaking with their voters directly. The technology is allowing them to do that. I would say that essentially the biggest pivot was the iPhone and the idea that you now had a camera on the front of it. So instead of going ahead and looking into this kind of a camera, or, the camera that you're looking into, the broadcast, everyone has had that experience where you're looking into an iPhone and it's a very authentic, very intimate experience. And then the speed of this is actually really remarkable because right now, and you referenced the future mayor of New York fairly early in the broadcast. The idea here is that you can respond extremely quickly to attacks. You can go ahead and get your message out immediately without any production. And so between those 3 things, that's where we are right now in our politics, at least in the United States and broadly throughout the world, has becoming more and more online.
And isn't that a good thing, the way you describe it?
You see, I believe it's actually an interesting, I don't know if it's good or bad or indifferent. So I don't know that. To me, the nice thing is that now you have this immediacy with your representatives who are, asking for your vote. The downside is that you don't get the thoughtfulness of thinking through issues. You have a lot more of a reactive candidate as opposed to someone who is being very thoughtful. They come up with a policy position, then they go ahead and they broadcast it out. Instead, something happens and you expect the people who you have voted for to have an instant reaction and one that is not only authentic, but also one that sort of reflects what you want. So I think that there is just a shift. I don't know that it's good, bad, or indifferent, but this is where we are right now. This is what people expect. And I think that that's how we have to engage people when we're voting.
Is the price of this immediacy and this authenticity one that we have to pay for politics, especially campaign politics, having become so incredibly orchestrated and polished that people just don't believe that stuff anymore? You know, and I think, you know, the campaign between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, for me, was this extraordinary clash between Trump's, you know, take it or leave it authenticity. You know, he was authentically rude. And people almost thought it's better to have someone who's authentically bad than someone who's inauthentically good. And then Hillary Clinton, who I remember famously in her iPod list of music that she listened to, had a little bit of Western, a little bit of country, a little bit of rock and roll, a little bit of, you know, techno. I mean, she ticked all the boxes because obviously her campaign team told her that that's what she ought to do, but you never really got the idea of what she actually liked to listen to. Whereas we know with Donald Trump that he loves the village people.
Yes, he does. Yeah, he'll listen to that all the time. He'll listen to the Rolling Stones. He's basically, you know, he became an adult essentially in the 70s and the 80s. So that's his music reference point. But to your point, you know, about Hillary Clinton, I think that there was an inauthenticity about her. There's an inauthenticity about Kamala Harris. There's an inauthenticity about a lot of the people that Donald Trump has gone up against. And for good, bad, or indifferent, you know who Donald Trump is. Donald Trump is the same person behind the camera as he is off camera. And so when you are looking at that, I think that in our situation where you have the convergence of technology and also the convergence of, we've had very polished presidents in this country, including President Obama. Usually what happens culturally in the United States, at least, is that you have a president and then we elect almost the diametrically opposite person. So for example, you have Obama, then you have Trump, then you have Biden, and now you have Trump again. And so, you know, I think that there's sort of a relative schizophrenia on how we look and what we want at certain times. And I think that Trump has not only created this moment, but don't forget, he's also a person who, as an adult, became aware of, you know, everyone became aware of him through television. So he understands what the camera is. He understands what works for him. And he also understands how people react to him if he acts a certain way on camera.
I mean, I've been to more Trump rallies than should be allowed to for anyone who's not a massive MAGA supporter, and they're always entertaining. You feel, especially as a journalist, like, you know, one of the Christians in the Colosseum with the lions rounding on you, because once upon a time, you know, he would point the finger at the press and say, that's the enemy, and then everyone would turn around and they would boo. And I never felt physically threatened, but it was slightly awkward, especially in a country that is normally very polite, you know, to each other, on the whole, and also to foreign journalists especially. But I just wonder whether, you know, Trump has got something that other politicians, even if they don't admit it, would love to have. And that is this ability to come up with a line that is just memorable, either because it's so awful or because it's so apt.
Yes. Not only that, but he's also willing to be the butt of the joke. So, for example, during our campaign, there was this little moment where Kamala Harris was in an interview and had talked about working at McDonald's. Now, there was no record from McDonald's, and there's no pictures of her working for McDonald's. What happens the next day? Donald Trump shows up with, you know, an apron on at McDonald's, and he's serving up French fries, and it's just he doesn't mind doing that, and then hitting her and saying, well, you know, I don't even know if she worked at McDonald's or anything like that. You know, but I know I am, and it's fun. You know, I just, you know, the idea.
But at the same time, he's also very thin-skinned, isn't he? I mean, if Caitlin Collins from CNN asked him a perfectly reasonable question the other day about Epstein, and he bit her head off. You know.
Well, he also understands too that not only now are we looking for authenticity, we're also looking for somebody who's willing to mix it up. And so that's the other part of the culture in the United States, which I think has changed a lot. It's happened through what reality TV is, even though it's fairly scripted. WWE, you know, pro wrestling. I mean, he's really that kind of a person. So he understands that if you're in this political environment, you can't give an inch. Even if you don't have the answer, you have to give an answer. And so I think to a certain extent, he understands that, where, for example, Kamala Harris in the United States did not. There was an advertisement that you were talking earlier about the spend on advertising. At the end of the campaign, for those who are not familiar, there was a trans ad against Kamala Harris, and they used her own words and stuff like that. Within the campaign for Kamala Harris, what did they do? They did the Hillary Clinton thing. They went and they polled, they did a lot of research. And what they found was they didn't have a really great answer. So they didn't answer. So this went on for a couple of weeks, and you saw that lead that she had evaporate completely. Whereas with Trump, he would have just woken up the next morning, and said something, and then totally shifted the conversation. So he understands not only what works for him, but also how the media works, that if you have to give them something to react to. And then if you're hit, you have to hit back immediately. You cannot wait. And it doesn't matter really what you say. The idea is that you're fighting back.
And we're all guilty of that. Here we spent most of this program this morning talking in one shape or another about Donald Trump. And people say, well, you should judge him by his actions and not by his words. But his words are his actions. You can't really ignore them altogether, because they move markets and they change trade policy, and they might decide the future between war and peace in the Middle East or in Ukraine.
Yes, no, absolutely. I think that people undervalue what he says. Usually what he does is he says what's on his mind. He doesn't poll test it. He's not lying to people. And if he says something in the moment that is controversial or even too far out, you have to take it seriously, because it does end up in a place, particularly in his second term. His first term, you might have said, well, okay, he doesn't really know what he's doing. But by now, he's been, essentially in public life for about 10 years in politics. And so you have a sense of being able to react to those things in real time.
Two very brief ones. What's the point of televised debates, in this era of social media?
They're big events. From a campaigning standpoint, I've worked in politics for the past 30 years. What you're looking for is those moments that Donald Trump is so good at, or frankly, Kamala Harris did very well in that debate versus Donald Trump. But what you're doing, though, is you're coming to the debate with people who are pretty solid on both sides. There are pro-Trump people and there are pro-Harris people, whatever candidate you're looking at. So they're not going to be moved. These are more rallies than they are events where you're going to learn a lot about a candidate. But what you do learn about a candidate in this situation that you don't in other situations is how they react to each other.
Yeah.
And how they react when they are pushed.
And in 10 seconds, is it good to have social media like this because it gets young people involved in politics?
Absolutely.
Okay, that was quick. Good. Dr. Michael Cohen, thanks very much. And thanks to all of you for listening, for writing and for texting, for shouting, for getting on air, and for engaging ever so politely with Alexa.